Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning in to News 9 Live. I'm Kabir Naqvi and we're bringing you this special broadcast of top stories from our studios here in the National Capital Region, styled exclusively by Paul Mall. We have an expansive list of stories for you to cover. It's for you to be on top of the news pulse of the day. We will talk about what's happening on the day 46 of that West Asian conflict between Israel and Hamas, a full-blown segment on that. But it's also important that in 2023, with the kind of carbon footprint and output that we're putting out, we talk about climate change stories as well. This, even as we're not going to digress away from the top global and international updates as well. But first and foremost, talking about stories back at home. There are about 40 workers that are still stuck in Uttarkashi. Authorities are tirelessly working to rescue the 41 workers trapped inside the partially collapsed tunnel in Uttarkashi. But the first visuals of the trapped workers from inside the tunnels have now come out. This via an endoscopic camera that was put in from one of those small diameter pipes that went into the portion beyond the collapsed part of the debris, where all the trapped workers can be seen standing over there. A 6-inch pipe has been successfully installed meanwhile into the debris, enabling the provision of solid food and improving communication with the trapped workers. Now the first visuals of the trapped workers are out. You can see them. These are pictures on your screens, thanks to an endoscopic camera that was sent through the pipe.
ये कौन है? ये विश्वजीत है। उसके बगल वाला बस हटाओ हटाओ कैमरा सब हटा दो।
सारे लोग ठीक है तो कैमरे में अपने आप को दिखाएं, हाथ खड़ा करें, अच्छे से मुस्कुराएं, हम तुम्हारे पास जल्दी पहुंचेंगे, घबराएं नहीं।
So the local authorities again and again telling all the workers that are trapped inside, look at some of those faces. For the first time, thanks to this endoscopic camera, they have in fact come out for the public to see and witness. People had thought that the position must be very dire, but it looks like it's more positive than people had actually thought it out to be in the beginning. There's ample light, there's enough room for all these workers to move around, which is exactly what the highwayman, Union Minister for Road Transport and National Highways, Nitin Gadkari, said as well. Now the camera shows the workers in their work gear and waving at the team. Everybody is standing up. It's great to see that none of them are in an ill condition, albeit what's happening inside their minds in terms of mental stress is a different ballgame altogether. The rescue workers were also asked to move closer to the camera, raise their hands, wave to the camera. Not everybody very enthusiastically waving back at the camera. Meanwhile, on the outside, families wait anxiously for any kind of update, but I'm sure they're all going to be happy to see the faces of all the trapped workers. According to experts, tunneling experts that have come from various parts of the country, Arnold Dix, he's somebody who's come from Australia. He's lauded the local authorities on the ground. Now, even as we're bringing you updates about how it's been over 170 hours, it's going to take an additional 4 days to reach out to these trapped workers to facilitate this operation. The pipes are successfully being put inside the debris. And there's a 5-action plan over here. We're talking about C-17, various aircrafts bringing in relief material to Uttarkashi. The Defense Research and Development Organization has dispatched 2 robots as well. Both these robots weigh 20 kilograms and 50 kilograms respectively. And Prime Minister Modi, via his office, has been on top of things. Speaking to the Chief Minister Pushkar Singh Dhami, the Union Minister for Transport and Highway was also there present for an on-site inspection of the rescue and relief works as well. Chief Minister Pushkar Singh Dhami, he expressed a commitment to evacuating all trapped workers on a quote-unquote war footing. Now, you know, before we move on and talk about the 5-option action plan, there is a couple of reactions that have come out. One, of course, from Arnold Dix himself, who's the expert when it comes to tunneling and evacuation, if God forbid something like this happens in case of a collapse. These are hefty machines that you can see on your screens that are carrying out that never-ending task from the Silkyara mouth tunnel. One's happening at the Borkat, which is the other mouth of the tunnel. A drilling is being taking place vertically, where a vertical bore is going to activate itself from the top of the tunnel. Now you have to be very precise when it comes to the top of the tunnel. We'll talk about all of that. First, let's quickly listen in to local authority reaction and the foreign expert who's there on the ground.
But I think the team here have done a wonderful job. It's one of the options. The 900 pipe which is there, which I've seen and I'm going to go have another look at this morning, it's by far the best and fastest means to get the men. But it has its technical difficulties, and that's why we're doing multiple rescue missions. You know, we've got mission from the top, missions from the front, mission from the side. We've got the men are coming home. We're just not sure which door they're going to use, right? We're knocking on the front door where the avalanche is, with several ways. We're knocking on the side door. Maybe that will work. We're knocking on the top door. We're knocking on all these doors. Which one opens? Not sure. I'll have to ask.
How many locations you identified for the vertical drilling?
Two. Yep.
Both are from Silkyara side.
Yep.
Not from Barkot.
No. There's a perfect. Just so we don't get run over, because we want no one else injured with this. Okay, so everyone off the road. The difficulty is come off, because seriously this thing will squash you. Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to rescue these men. When I arrived here, I said there's 41 men coming home and there's no one else going to be hurt, and that's the mission. And everyone here from all the government agencies, that's what they're working on. And I am absolutely convinced, and all the agencies are here, they're working closely together, and the mission is clear. 41 men are coming home. When? I don't know when. I don't know if it's 3 days or 4 days or whatever. What I know is they were dancing with Diwali when they went in, and my plan is that they'll be singing Christmas carols at Christmas, sometime between Diwali and Christmas. They're coming home. Exactly when?
But
not sure.
Will be sure.
I'm sure of the rescue. Absolutely sure.
जैसा कि इन्फॉर्म किया गया 41 लोग अंदर हैं जो सेफ है, उनको खाना की सामान भी अंदर पाइपलाइन एक छोटी उसके तहत मुहैया करवाई जा रही है, बिजली की सप्लाई दी जा रही है, और लॉजिस्टिक की अभी कोई दिक्कत नहीं है। उनकी सेफ्टी अभी जो इंश्योर की गई है तो सेफ है, और एजेंसी NHIDCL जो इस पे काम कर रही है, तो जो एक्सपर्ट्स भी अब इकट्ठे हो गए और भी लोगों से इनसे ओपिनियन लिया जा रहा है, तो जो बेस्ट पॉसिबल है उस तरह से हम रास्ता बनाकर उनको बाहर निकालने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। तो इसमें बेसिकली अभी टेक्निकल
Well, now, the rescue operations involve multiple strategies. The National Highways and Infrastructure Development Corporation, the NHIDCL, is resuming the horizontal boring from the Silkyara end, the one that you can see on your screens as well, using an auger boring machine to rescue the workers. Meanwhile, on the other hand, the SJVNL's first machine for constructing the vertical rescue tunnel has reached the tunnel site. We earlier saw that long-prone drill machine that you could see laying back on the back of a truck. And various other operations that are commencing after Border Roads Organization has completed the access road to get onto the top of it. This is that particular vertical bore that you see on your screens now. Now, the construction of a 480-meter rescue tunnel from Barkot end by the Tehri Hydro Development Corporation, which is the THDC, is also underway. On the other hand, the Rail Vikas Nigam Limited, the RVNL, is transporting machinery for micro-tunneling through horizontal drilling from Nashik and Delhi for the rescue operations. Particularly, the ONGC, which is the Oil and Natural Gas Corporation, is mobilizing machinery for vertical boring from the United States of America, from Mumbai, from Ghaziabad, you name it, from all places that you can bring in machinery to safeguard these workers and safely rescue them. Well, it's being done. The BRO has accomplished a commendable feat by constructing the approach road for the vertical drilling by RVNL and SJVNL within a span of 48 hours. Work is ongoing to create an approach road for the ONGC as well. First pictures of the trapped workers. That's the big highlight of the day. For the first time ever since the tunnel collapse actually happened 10 days ago, 170 plus hours that they've been trapped inside. The first visuals of the men who were trapped inside. Pictures looking more positive than people initially thought them out to be. Let's hope for the best. Let's hope that they come out, like the expert was saying, before Christmas. Meanwhile, moving on here, to symbolize the marking of the 15th year of commemoration of the Mumbai terror attacks, the State of Israel has listed Lashkar-e-Taiba as a terror organization. Now, notably, the Indian government didn't request Israel to do so. However, the state formally completed all necessary procedures and has satisfied all required checks and regulations to the result of introducing Lashkar-e-Toiba into the Israeli list of illegal terror organizations. While Israel only lists terror organizations who are actively operating against it from within or around its borders, or in a similar manner to India, those globally recognized by the UNSC or the United States' State Department, the Israeli Ministries of Defense and Foreign Affairs have jointly worked in the last few months towards an expedited and extraordinary listing of the Lashkar-e-Toiba organization on this particular date, which is the 15th year. Now, to highlight the importance of a unified global front in combating terrorism, these points have been done. Well, meanwhile, bringing you a full-blown segment and live updates that are coming across from the war front and the international diplomacy that surrounds the Israel-Hamas war that's coming up next. The following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being. Now, the war between Israel and Hamas has entered its 46th day. While Israel has expanded its operations into southern Gaza, a truce might be on the cards with a deal to release the hostages. Let's take a look at the top developments from the war front first. Israel and Hamas are getting closer to a truce as per various media reports that are now doing the rounds, citing Joe Biden, citing an Hamas official, speaking to Qatari mediators, and speaking to Al Jazeera channel that has been cited in these media reports as well. Now, on the other hand, military ops at Indonesia hospital is in complete compliance with international law, says Ophir Falk, who's the foreign policy advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. On the other hand, 100 patients were evacuated from the Indonesian hospital, according to the Gazan Health Ministry. This even as 28 newborns were transferred to Egypt from Gaza's Al-Shifa, of course, via the Rafah crossing. The World Health Organization official Michael Ryan has warned of possible breakouts of epidemics inside and across the Gaza Strip as humanitarian crisis widens. But in terms of fighting a multi-pronged war, Yemen's Houthis have released a video of the Red Sea hijacking of the cargo ship that Israeli says has no Israelis on board, but we're putting it out there for everybody else to see. It's a French vessel. It has Israeli connections as well and is run by a Japanese company. Now, over 13,000 Palestinians have been killed in this particular war, according to the Gazan Health Ministry, more than 5,000 of them being children. But now, after 46 days, even as the ground operations are expanding by the minute, people are moving from the north part of the strip to the south part of the strip. UN places, UN safeguarded schools and hospitals, well, they are being attacked and bombed as well. Now, none of this is new, but the diplomacy that's taking shape around it, that is certainly new. The Hamas has said that it is nearing a truce with Israel, even as Gaza continues to be under bombardment from the Israeli Defense Forces. The group has delivered its response to Qatari mediators. Now, take a look at this. While the statement provided no further details, a Hamas official told Al Jazeera TV that negotiations revolved around how long the truce would last, arrangements for delivery of aid into Gaza, and the exchange of Israeli hostages, mostly women and children, held by Hamas for the Palestinian prisoners in Israel. Now, modalities of the agreement will be announced by Qatar, which is mediating in the negotiations. That's the latest that we're picking up. But that's not all. In the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict, President Joe Biden has signaled progress in negotiations for the release of approximately 240-plus hostages. The discussions, mediated by Qatar, began right after that deadly attack by Hamas, marking the tragic day in Israel's history. Meanwhile, the proposed deal involves exchanging 50 hostages for a 3-day ceasefire, facilitating increased emergency aid to reach Gaza's civilians. The White House and Israeli officials initially denied the existence of a finalized agreement. However, they have acknowledged progress in the talks.
So today, I think you know Secretary Austin is in Kyiv to meet with Ukraine's leaders. I know this is of great interest to all of you. I just want to let you know we're still working this hour by hour. I do not have an update for you on the hostage deal that we're trying to negotiate. But as you heard the Deputy National Security Advisor say yesterday, we believe we're closer than we've ever been. So we're hopeful. But there's still work to be done, and nothing is done until it's all done. So we're going to keep working on this. We're also working to increase the flow of life-saving humanitarian assistance, food, water, medicine. We're calling for respecting the international law in terms of minimizing the loss of innocent lives. And of course, we're continuing to advocate for humanitarian pauses so that people can get out of harm's way and that aid and assistance can get in. Over the last couple of days, the 18th and the 19th of November, almost 100 trucks carrying humanitarian aid were able to enter Gaza. That brings the total to over 1,260. And then following Israel's announcement that it's allowing fuel now into Gaza to support non-governmental organizations at our strong request, we are now tracking that 6 trucks have crossed down into Gaza with approximately 18,000 gallons of fuel. That will help support food distribution and it will help generators for the hospital so that they can keep working. The total number of U.S. citizens that we've been able to move out of Gaza through that Rafah crossing is now up to 800. We're continuing to work that every day as well.
So is it going to be an exchange of the Palestinian prisoners? Is it going to be 50 hostages that are going to be released for a 3-day pause? All of that is being proposed and is being worked out. But if Joe Biden and the White House and the Hamas official who spoke to the Al Jazeera TV channel, if their statements are anything to go by, well, we're closer to a negotiation deal than we were ever before. Fingers crossed. Let's hope for good sense to prevail. But on the other hand, the Israeli army that's carrying out its expansive operations in the Gaza Strip, it has released a video on Monday of what they describe as a weaponry lab under a mosque in Gaza City's Zaytun neighborhood. Army spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, he said that Israeli forces discovered a factory that produced weapons and unmanned aerial vehicles, which are UAVs, and a tunnel shaft in the search of that particular Gazan mosque. The soldiers from the 188th Brigade located inside a mosque, a factory that produced weapons and UAVs. I want you to understand, a mosque in the area of Zaytun has been used as a factory for the production of weapons. Soldiers entered the mosque and conducted a search, working in cooperation with soldiers from the Yahalom unit, and after the forces checked that there were no traps, they discovered a tunnel shaft. In addition to this tunnel shaft, the soldiers went further below and discovered a workshop for making rockets. Well, now, in the video that has been released, and the pictures are on your screen, there's a proper subtitling of what the Israeli Defense Forces troop is talking in Hebrew, of course, showcases that there's a basement vent, there's a tunnel shaft as well. They showcased all the weapons that were out there. All this incriminating evidence against the Hamas that IDF alleges this mosque was being used as a weaponry factory to put out weapons, UAVs as well, your drones. That is what the IDF is right now alleging. Now, they safely had to check for traps, and after checking all those traps, they also discovered a tunnel shaft as well. But just like the tunnel shaft that they discovered below the Al-Shifa hospital, beg your pardon, we still don't know what's behind that particular shaft, what's behind that blast-proof door. And even as we're talking about the hostages' negotiation that's already taking place, and various diplomatic huddles are taking shape across the globe as well, relatives of some of the 240 people that are held by Hamas in Gaza urged the far-right Israeli lawmakers on Monday not to pursue capital punishment for the captured Palestinian terrorists, saying that even talk of doing so might endanger the hostages and their lives. There was a proper meet that happened. Far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir He called for the death penalty, which is dormant on Israel's law books. Some of the relatives of the people held captive by Hamas in Gaza worry about the publicity around the capital punishment debate that could invite reprisals, even as hopes of a deal to free some of them is growing on. The hostages have already been threatened with execution by Hamas and are at risk of being hurt or killed in the military offensive that has been launched by the IDF after the October 7th attack.
Look at us, but not as an outsider. Look at us as if she's your sister, as if he's your child, your grandchild. Would you risk anything that could now harm his life? When he's back, prosecute them. Raise this discussion again. But he's not here because of this. He may never return.
And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu facing pressure from all corners is certainly going to be an understatement. Some family members of Israeli hostages abducted by Hamas said that they were very disappointed after meeting with the members of Israel's war cabinet. Relatives of the over 240 some hostages have been advocating for the Israeli government to get their loved ones back as soon as possible. Thousands of family members recently finished a 5-day march from Tel Aviv to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's house in Jerusalem, where he eventually promised that they could meet with members of Israel's war cabinet this week. After a war cabinet meeting with ministers and handful of family members on Monday evening, the families hoped Israel's government would prioritize the return of the hostages first and foremost.
I went in with one single question, to know if all of the war cabinet supports the same stand that Gantz and Eisenkot took a couple of days ago when they met with us, when they said absolutely clear, without hesitation, that bringing out the hostages is the top priority as far as they're concerned. And now when we've met with the entire cabinet, what we've heard is that taking down Hamas and bringing the hostages are as important, are equally important.
Meanwhile, member states of United Nations General Assembly called for a ceasefire and an increase in aid to Gaza on Monday. Israel has ordered the evacuation of North Gaza, but thousands of civilians remain. Food, fuel, medicines, water, and hope. They've all been running out across the enclave under Israel's 6-week-old siege. In the south, where hundreds of thousands, who fled the north of the enclave are sheltering, there have been reports of Israeli strikes as well. The United Nations says 2/3 of Gaza's 2.3 million people have been made homeless.
The humanitarian situation in Gaza is catastrophic, alarming really. Essential services have nearly collapsed, with unimaginable consequences for more than 2 million civilians. To this day, humanitarian access continues to be unsafe, severely limited and undependable. The aid that enters Gaza is but a fraction of what is required. An immediate and massive scale-up of aid is needed.
Where is the respect for international humanitarian law? How much more death and destruction can one cope with? How many more attacks on schools, hospitals, humanitarian workers, and so on must we witness? The level of suffering in Gaza is unbearable and inhumane. We welcome the UN Security Council resolution adopted last Wednesday. It was long overdue, and a humanitarian ceasefire is now a crucial next step.
The humanitarian situation in Gaza is catastrophic and worsening daily. An immediate humanitarian ceasefire is essential, and we repeat our calls for this, along with an urgent and significant scaling up of humanitarian access and supplies, including food, fuel, water, and medical supplies.
That for the sake of the UN and humanity, meeting and commitments are not enough. Resolutions and statements are not enough. It needs to be implemented on the ground. We need concrete action now. We need a humanitarian ceasefire now. We need unimpeded delivery of humanitarian assistance now.
And during informal discussions at the UNGA on the humanitarian situation in Gaza, India's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ruchira Kamboj, stated that India welcomes international efforts for de-escalation, facilitating urgent humanitarian aid to Palestinians, and that our leaders unequivocally oppose terrorism. Listen in.
India welcomes all efforts by the international community that strive towards a de-escalation of the conflict and enables the delivery of urgent humanitarian assistance to the people of Palestine. The message from our leaders has been clear and consistent. We are firmly opposed to terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, clearly against violence, and are on the side of adherence to international humanitarian law and ensuring that further escalation is prevented, humanitarian aid delivery continues, all hostages are released unconditionally, and all parties work towards an early restoration of peace and stability. Towards this, we also welcome efforts for humanitarian pauses. We are also firm, Mr. President, in our commitment to provide humanitarian aid to the people of Palestine and have already delivered 70 tons of disaster relief materials, including 17 tons of medicines and medical supplies in 2 tranches, and our humanitarian support will continue. Similarly, India continues to play an active role as a member of the Advisory Commission of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. Mr. President, let me conclude by underlining India's consistent position of achieving a just, peaceful and lasting solution to the Israel-Palestine issue. India has always advocated the resumption of direct negotiations towards establishing a sovereign, independent and viable state of Palestine.
And even as we wrap this segment on Israel-Hamas war, and mind you, on News 9 Live, we will continue to put out those updates from the war front as and when we get them. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu defended the military's action in Gaza. He spoke as Israelis marched onto his office in Jerusalem, seeking government action to release the hostages held by Hamas terrorists, and pro-Palestinian protests worldwide demanding a humanitarian ceasefire to save Gazans trapped in the enclave. He says, well, they're abiding by international humanitarian law.
Israel abides by the laws of war. That's how our army works, the most moral army in the world. Humanitarian aid is also vital to maintain international support. Without humanitarian aid, even our best friends will find it difficult to support us over time. And it will be very difficult for us to continue the war until the end.
Well, next up, shifting our focus to some top international and global updates as well. And first up, looking at this, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was quoted as saying the government should just let people die during the COVID-19 pandemic rather than impose a second national lockdown. The inquiry into how Britain handled this crisis is now being observed.
British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak reportedly said the government should, quote, just let people die during the COVID-19 pandemic rather than impose a second lockdown. That's according to Patrick Vallance, who testified on Monday as part of an inquiry into how Britain handled the crisis. Vallance was the government's chief scientific advisor during the pandemic. He made a note in his diary on October 25, 2020, about a meeting involving then Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Sunak, who was finance minister. The diary entry recorded, Rishi thinks just let people die and that's okay. This all feels like a complete lack of leadership. A spokesperson for Sunak said the Prime Minister would set out his position when he gives evidence to the inquiry. Previous evidence has shown Sunak was branded as Dr. Death by one science advisor for his policy in the summer of 2020, encouraging Britons to eat at pubs and restaurants. Senior officials have repeatedly said the government was unprepared for the pandemic. More than 220,000 people died in Britain, and large sections of the economy were shut down. The inquiry is set to run until the summer of 2026.
Moving on, OpenAI's recently fired CEO Sam Altman is taking position at Microsoft, while his former firm has named Emmett Shear, who was once the boss of the video gaming streaming service Twitch, as its new interim chief executive.
OpenAI's recently fired CEO Sam Altman is taking a position at Microsoft, while his former firm has named Emmett Shear, who was once the boss of the video game streaming service Twitch, as its new interim chief executive. The C-suite staff shakeup capped a tumultuous weekend for the startup, synonymous with the artificial intelligence boom. The appointments, which settled late Sunday, followed Altman's abrupt ousting just days earlier as the CEO of the ChatGPT maker and ended speculation he could return. Microsoft is an investor in OpenAI, and Altman's move, along with another OpenAI co-founder, helps the software giant keep key talent away from rivals like Google and Amazon. Microsoft shares rose 2% in Monday afternoon trading and hit an all-time high. The startup's newly appointed interim boss moved quickly to dismiss speculation that OpenAI's board ousted Altman due to a spat over the safety of powerful AI models. Shear vowed to open an investigation into his predecessor's firing. The startup dismissed Altman on Friday after what an internal memo seen by Reuters characterized as a breakdown of communications. On Monday, stakes rose further. According to a letter seen by Reuters, a member of the OpenAI board and nearly 500 employees threatened to leave the company unless the board stepped down and reinstated Altman and another former executive. OpenAI did not immediately respond to a request for comment. A source familiar with the matter said employees of OpenAI, which is governed by a nonprofit, are split between different ideals. Some are focused on building artificial intelligence and against moving too fast without sufficient guardrails, while others recruited after the success of ChatGPT are more interested in quickly building and launching products, akin to the traditional idea of a Silicon Valley startup, the source said.
But there's more to this, because investors in OpenAI are considering legal actions against the board after the removal of CEO Sam Altman. These investors worry that their hundreds of millions invested in OpenAI, a crown jewel in some of their portfolios, could suffer catastrophic losses as a result of what appears to be a potential collapse of the hottest AI startup in the rapidly growing generative sector. Let's hear what the experts have had to say.
Now, Microsoft may decide to give him a lot of leeway because they benefit from this happening, but they can't give him infinite leeway because that becomes impossible. You have a public company you're running. OpenAI was not a public company. There's a very different situation in a public company. So he will have to constrain himself. There's no choice. And if he can't constrain himself, then he would end up leaving and doing something else. And by the way, if I was Microsoft, I wouldn't have hired him. I would have told him to start a new company and given him a bunch of money to start a new company. I actually was kind of surprised that Microsoft hired him because it opens more exposure for Microsoft and actually constrains Sam from doing all the things he would want to do. If he had known, he would have taken action. This would have been a very easy thing for him to prevent if he knew about it, which is precisely why the board never told Microsoft, for example. It would have been trivially easy for a CEO to do that. But what I think happens with a lot of guys, and this happened with Elon Musk as well, is that you can either have a mission that you're passionate about, or you can be distracted by 50 missions. And what was happening for him was because he was taking on other projects that are unrelated to the core mission, you cannot be passionate about 50 missions. It's very hard to do. And that's the risk that I think Sam was falling into and that Elon has definitely fallen into. But one of the good things that's going to happen out of this is organizations will realize they have to look at multiple models. They can't just put all their eggs in one basket. This idea that one model will rule them all is a completely wrong idea. Because for different use cases, for different situations, different models will be better. Innovation is happening very quickly. So if there is one benefit out of this craziness is that people start thinking beyond a model and start thinking about, I will need the right model for the right job, and I need a flexible system that can do that. That would be a good thing out of this craziness.
My worst fears are that we, the field, the technology, the industry, cause significant harm. Microsoft has become the player. So it's insane. Like Google was, Gemini was their big play, their hope, because Bard hasn't done it. Gemini gets pushed back till January. The worst thing that could have possibly happened, because if Google right now had Gemini to come out and and it was good, it was like what it's supposed to be, they would be they're going crazy right now. But Microsoft is they're holding all the keys. They are the dominant player in AI by far. The future of AI will never be boring. That's the only thing that we really know. Because it's funny, news and like companies making or breaking even happen at AI breakneck speeds. Think about what happened over a news cycle of a weekend would have, in the past been like 6 months, So yeah, it's gonna just keep going as fast as we've seen, and it's fun.
Well, moving on, in a recent development, United States President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping have agreed to schedule another meeting as confirmed by the White House. Now, the leaders had convened on the outskirts of San Francisco, where they reached a consensus to re-establish military-to-military communications between the two countries. According to White House spokesperson John Kirby, while they affirmed plans for a subsequent meeting, a specific date has not yet been determined. Kirby emphasized the significance of restarting military communications, stating what's really important now is that the military comms will begin to start, and even down to the theater commander level.
So today, I think Secretary Austin is in Kyiv to meet with Ukraine's leaders. I know this is of great interest to all of you. I just want to let you know we're still working this hour by hour. I do not have an update for you on the hostage deal that we're trying to negotiate. But as you heard the Deputy National Security Advisor say yesterday, we believe we're closer than we've ever been. So we're hopeful. But there's still work to be done, and nothing is done until it's all done. So we're going to keep working on this. We're also working to increase the flow of life-saving humanitarian assistance, food, water, medicine. We're calling for respecting the international law in terms of minimizing the loss of innocent lives. And of course, we're continuing to advocate for humanitarian pauses so that people can get out of harm's way and that aid and assistance can get in. Over the last couple of days, the 18th and the 19th of November, almost 100 trucks carrying humanitarian aid were able to enter Gaza. That brings the total to over 1,260. And then following Israel's announcement that it's allowing fuel now into Gaza to support non-governmental organizations at our strong request, we are now tracking that 6 trucks have crossed down into Gaza with approximately 18,000 gallons of fuel. That will help support food distribution and it will help generators for the hospital so that they can keep working. The total number.
While maintaining our focus on United States, Trump's recent rhetoric, marked by intense attacks on domestic opponents during a Veterans Day speech, has triggered concerns about his authoritarian tendencies. Unlike his prior focus on external targets, these pointed attacks have drawn comparisons to totalitarian leaders of the past, echoing language used by historical authoritarian figures. At a New Hampshire rally on November 14th, Trump vowed to root out communists, Marxists, fascists, and radical left thugs within the United States, alleging election fraud cost him the 2020 presidency.
With your help, your love, and your vote, we will put America first. And today, especially in honor of our great veterans on Veterans Day, we pledge to you that we will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country, that lie and steal and cheat on elections and will do anything possible. They'll do anything, whether legally or illegally, to destroy America and to destroy the American dream.
Experts previously concerned about his admiration for foreign dictators and disregard for democratic values now highlight his shift towards targeting perceived internal enemies, a trait associated with dangerous totalitarian leaders. Trump's history of incendiary remarks, including recent comments linking immigrants to poisoning the blood of our country, quote unquote, intensifies worries about his approach as the frontrunner for the Republican nomination in the 2024 election against Joe Biden. But talking about Trump, must talk about Javier Milei as well, because Trump has taken to the microblogging website congratulating the Argentine leader. Now, Javier Milei, an Argentine libertarian, secured a significant victory in the presidential runoff election, vowing to usher in a new era for the country. With voters pinning their hopes on this political outsider, the focus lies on addressing the country's challenges: triple-digit inflation, an impending recession, and increasing poverty, all in need of urgent resolution.
Argentina elected the right-wing libertarian Javier Milei as its new president on Sunday. Voters rolled the dice on an outsider with radical views to fix an economy battered by runaway inflation, giving Milei, an economist and former TV pundit, a clear win with 56% of the ballots. He appears to have successfully harnessed a wave of public anger with Argentina's political mainstream.
Today brings an end to the impoverishing model of the omnipresent state that only benefits some while the majority of Argentines suffer. Today we retake the path that made this country great. Today we embrace the ideas of libertarianism.
Milei's rival, Economy Minister Sergio Massa, conceded before official results were out. In a speech that lightly veiled his centrist concerns over Milei, Massa said Argentina expected the new president to, quote, provide certainty and guarantees to the functioning of political, social and economic systems. Yet it is Milei's promise to shake everything up that seems to have lured these celebrating supporters to his camp.
Argentina needed a change, and that's why I bet on this new proposal.
I want a change for my country that I deeply love. We've been suffering many years of decadence, and this seemed to me like a good option. No more of the same. Enough already with Peronism. We already know them.
The challenges facing Milei are enormous, from the government and central bank's empty coffers to a $44 billion debt program with the International Monetary Fund and inflation nearing 150%. He's pledging economic shock therapy with plans to shut the central bank, ditch the peso for the dollar, and slash spending, pushing for minimal state intervention in line with the libertarian ethos. He used to carry around a chainsaw in a symbol of his planned cuts, but shelved it in recent weeks in favor of a more moderate image. The eccentric 53-year-old is also staunchly anti-abortion, backs looser gun laws, and has criticized the progressive Pope Francis. Milei faces a highly fragmented Congress with no single bloc having a majority. This means he will need backing from other factions to push through legislation. After October's first-round vote, Milei struck an uneasy alliance with the country's main conservative bloc. That helped him win middle-ground voters on Sunday, but it could also put the reins on some of his more extreme plans.
And moving on, Taiwan's presidential frontrunner Lai Ching-te has chosen Xiao Bikim as his running mate. Now, Bikim is a former envoy to the United States who's popular in the Washington circle, but China considers him as a separatist. Now, Lai and Xiao, both despised by China, face increasing pressure as Taiwan asserts its sovereignty.
Taipei's former envoy to the United States has been named the vice presidential candidate for the upcoming election on Monday. Xiao Meiqing is a high-profile diplomat well known in Washington, but who Beijing denounces as a separatist. She will be running alongside Lai Ching-te, the ruling Democratic Progressive Party's presidential candidate.
I believe we have lots of common convictions. We are both willing to take on responsibility for Taiwan, with a common belief that Taiwan's democracy and freedom can last forever. That is our deepest connection.
The DPP champions Taiwan's separate identity from China, while the largest opposition party, the Kuomintang, traditionally favors close ties with Beijing. Lai has led in most opinion polls ahead of the election, which is taking place as Taiwan comes under increased pressure from China to accept its sovereignty claim. Xiao has been Taiwan's de facto ambassador to the United States since 2020. She has extensive connections in Washington. The Foreign Ministry accepted her resignation as U.S. envoy earlier on Monday. The United States, as with most countries, has no formal ties with Taiwan, but it's the island's most important international supporter and arms supplier. Like Lai, Xiao is despised by China, which has twice placed sanctions on her. China's foreign ministry declined to answer a question about Xiao, saying it was not a diplomatic issue. China's Taiwan Affairs Office on Wednesday referred to Lai and Xiao as an independence double act, adding that Taiwan's people were very clear about what their partnership meant for the situation in the Taiwan Strait. It did not elaborate. Lai dismissed China's comment.
China's thoughtless remarks on this election are sufficient to prove that China is intervening in this election, because none of the Chinese officials have gone through the baptism of democracy. So there is no reason for us to reply to these remarks.
Xiao was born in Japan to a Taiwanese father and American mother. Unusual in Taiwan, she uses an English spelling of her name based on its Taiwanese Hokkien pronunciation to underscore her identity as being Taiwanese and not Chinese.
And Colombian singer Shakira reached a settlement on Monday to avoid a trial over charges of not paying 14.5 million euros, that's about $15.74 million, in Spanish income tax between the year 2012 and 2014. Now, in the deal, instead of jail time, the prosecution opted for fines, as mentioned by the judge in the trial's first hearing.
Colombian pop star Shakira reached a settlement with prosecutors on Monday to avoid a trial over charges she failed to pay 14.5 million euros in Spanish income tax. She argued it was triggered by personal reasons. As a part of the deal, she accepted the charges and a fine of 50% of the amount owed, which is more than 7.3 million euros. She also accepted another 438,000 euros fine to avoid a 3-year prison sentence. The pop star had previously vowed to fight what she called false accusations, but in a statement, she said she decided to prioritize her career and kids. One of Shakira's lawyers told reporters outside the courthouse the legal team was convinced it could prove Shakira's innocence, but that the circumstances had changed. The prosecutor's office was seeking up to 8 years in prison, as well as claiming back the taxes it says she owes. It alleged that between 2012 and 2014, Shakira spent more than half of each of the years in question in Spain and was therefore ordinarily resident in the country. It also said that a Barcelona property she bought in May 2012 served as a family home. The pop star, who recently won 2 Latin Grammy Awards, has a second tax fraud investigation pending with Spanish authorities.
And rapper A$AP Rocky, whose given name is Rakeem Myers, was ordered on Monday to stand trial in Los Angeles on 2 felony counts of assault with a semi-automatic weapon. Myers is the romantic partner of recording superstar Rihanna and the father of her 2 sons as well.
You sure? Yeah. Okay.
Rapper A$AP Rocky was ordered on Monday to stand trial in Los Angeles on 2 felony counts of assault with a semi-automatic weapon. The 35-year-old is accused of pointing a handgun at another hip-hop artist and former friend Terrell Efron, and then, in a second confrontation, firing twice in his direction. Both encounters are said to have occurred on November 6, 2021. Rocky was arrested in connection with the altercation in April 2022 and formally charged in August. Since his arrest, Rocky's romantic partner, pop superstar and makeup mogul Rihanna, has given birth to 2 sons fathered by him. A Los Angeles judge ruled on Monday that prosecutors had enough evidence to proceed to trial on both counts. The Harlem-born musician, who remains free on bond, has pleaded not guilty in the case. Rocky's defense has argued that evidence presented by the prosecutors that the shooting even occurred is inconclusive, and they have questioned the veracity of Efron's testimony that his left hand was grazed in the gunfire, according to local media. Efron has performed under the stage name as A$AP Relly as part of a hip-hop collective that once included both men. Local media reports that he has also filed a civil suit against Rocky.
And social media platform X has sued watchdog group Media Matters over claims that X put ads for major brands appeared next to content praising Hitler and the Nazis. This next report will tell you more.
Social network X is suing watchdog group Media Matters over claims that ads for major brands appeared next to content touting Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. Elon Musk's firm says the report defamed it and was based on manipulation. In a Texas lawsuit, X says Media Matters resorted to endless scrolling and refreshing until it found ads next to extremist posts. The company says that misrepresented the typical user experience with the intention of harming X and its business. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has also opened a probe, saying he was extremely troubled by allegations that Media Matters manipulated data.
We're at a really critical moment right now.
In an emailed statement, Media Matters President Angelo Carusone called the lawsuit frivolous and said it was meant to bully X's critics into silence. The watchdog group is widely seen as liberal-leaning, and its allegations have added to the financial challenges for X. Major advertisers, including IBM and Comcast, have pulled marketing on the platform following the report. That comes after a previous exodus of advertisers following Musk's purchase last year of the network then known as Twitter. Reuters has previously reported that ad revenue at X has been down at least 55% on the year every month since the takeover. Many firms have been wary of Musk's contentious posts. Those concerns flared anew this week after the billionaire was accused of endorsing an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory posted on X.
And well, a new adaptation of The Colour Purple premieres in London. The musical is an attempt to retell the classic story based on the 1983 Pulitzer-winning bestseller. The Colour Purple was first adapted on screen in 1985, and its story of two black American teenage sisters in southern United States during the early 1900s during the slavery. The director, Blitz Bazawuke, says it's pertinent to retell this story in a new way.
The biggest thing was just making sure that we could justify our reason for being, actually contributing to the canon, right, of The Color Purple. And I really think that that's like for me at least, I was really wanting us to explore Celie's headspace and give her that imagination, because I knew that ultimately, you know, there's a big miscategorization of people who are abused and traumatized.
I was going through stuff. So I was carrying her cross and mine. And I didn't like that. That was heavy. So I remember I was like, I would never do this again. Never. Once I'm done, I'm done. And when Scott called me to do it for the movie, I actually said no. I did. And he said to me, he says, I know you're married, I know you're happy, but you're my Celie. And I said, Scott, I moved on from all of the things that I had to tap into to play her. But I knew I had to do it for my daughters and every young girl that looks like us.
Are we ever truly decolonized? Because for many, it's a never-ending process, which is why it is important to retell these stories as well. I'm waiting out for the new adaptation of The Color Purple. Well, just a little bit of a thought for you to think about as well. That's all the time we have for you in this edition of Top Stories. Lots more continues right on the other side. Don't go anywhere.
News 9 big coverage of